All right. Welcome to the Lil Pete and Miss Chris podcast. Uh, just hold on to that. It should be coming up shortly. Okay. So today we are gonna be touching base on. We're gonna be talking, touching base on. We're gonna be touching base on the topic. Don't tell nobody. Family secrets. Okay. Okay. Let's go ahead and wrap that up. Okay. So again, today's topic is going to be don't tell nobody, family secrets. And we're going to have a very special guest again. So without further ado, I'm going to go ahead on and bring in my guest.
That was quick.
Welcome back, Frank.
Hey, how y'all doing?
We are doing well. So today's topic is going to be don't tell nobody, family secrets. And again, I thought about this and I said, well, you know what? Let me go ahead on and bring somebody that kind of knows history in on this topic. I know people were thinking, oh, well, they probably going to be talking about all kinds of craziness, but that's not where we're going today. We're actually going to talk about how throughout the generation that we have been as children and younger adults told to stay in our places and been hidden or kept safe from things that were going on in our family because they just felt like it ain't nobody business. You know? You with me? You with me there?
Oh yeah.
Okay. So yeah, so what okay, so this is the deal, right? Um I'm gonna have some questions and I kinda want you to, if you don't mind, kinda touch base on some of those things like the family secrets or just okay, so you got your book. We once were a family. See if you can kind of blend in some of that into the topic we're touching base on right
Right.
now. Take it away.
Oh, you know what's ironic about this subject is that I was actually having a similar conversation with a podcaster from Chicago, And what you just mentioned, you said as far as like, growing up as kids or children, period. Staying out of grown people's conversations, so to speak, or if it may be a detriment to anything that goes on, as far as how it affects someone's life. You know, um, One of the answers to your question is, do I think that kids need to know everything opposed to a grown person's conversation? And that's absolutely not. I have to really disagree with that.
True. True.
Mhm. And my reasons are is that kids should be kids. Number one, you can't put kids, on the same equal playing field as an adult. That's why you're the parent and they're the kid. You can't give them the same, so to speak, conversations. You got to watch yourself. I know me. I mean, personally, Chris and Kurt. I'm gonna be honest with you. Two parent household plays a very detrimental role. In a lot of discipline, as far as your mannerisms, and as far as your disciplinary growth. Contrary to believe, you have a lot of single parent households and you have a lot of women and a lot of men that's doing fantastic jobs, not channeling them out as well too. But I do know that, growing up in a two parent household, my dad was a disciplinary. He was the kind of guy that he meant what he said and he said what he meant. He just didn't give the proper balance that went with it. But as far as we would actually, Kurt, and I don't even think that you may know this, but we weren't allowed in my parents' bedroom at all. My dad and my mom, when they would have, and I've said this many times on radio shows too, when we curtailed into this conversation, we had something that we needed to say, or my parents wanted to communicate something, over to us after dinner, or they didn't see us in passing, in the hallway, in the apartment. They would call us to their room, and we had to actually literally stand by the door and talk to them. My dad sat right there by the door. My mom, she wasn't too far away. And that's how we had to speak to them, because they really believed in that sanctity, of, a bedroom and the sanctity of privacy as an adult.
Right. Right. Yeah.
But when he called me in the room, Kurt, when he called me in the room, I knew I was in trouble.
So you saying when you had to make that bedroom visit, it wasn't gonna be good.
Yeah, oh yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. When when I had to make that bedroom visit, oh, it was something serious. It was definitely something serious. And he would call me by my full name. And that's how I knew I was in trouble, Chris. And when he said my full name and then he added that junior at the end. Oh Lord, I knew I was. Man, I thought back on bad grades. I thought back on teach. I knew it was something serious because they never invited us into the room unless it was really something serious. But any normal conversation, that was actually generated like right there by the door. Out of respect, to my parents and out of respect to their privacy as adults.
Right.
Even when your name was brought up, Kurt, back in the day, you caught me in the room. That Kurt, we got to go get him.
Wait a minute. Wait a minute. Wait a minute. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. I guess that really wasn't a family secret, but I guess if it was, it ain't anymore. So yeah.
Yeah.
So true. I can remember. I can remember a lot of times that it was like during those times they would say, "Hey, listen, you guys, y'all go outside." They say this, "Go play. Can't you see grown folks play?" Right? That would be one of the main things they would say. But there was times when, as a child, I witnessed things and I know I'm not the only one, but as a child, there were times when I witnessed things that I should, you know,
Mhm.
um, and I do believe that, when those things happen to you as a child, they don't just, you don't go sleep it off, you know,
Right.
they stay with you and your subconscious, and they go on, and when we speak about this to me, and this is okay, yes, and any of these thoughts, expressions, or whatever it says, it's solely that of the individual that is speaking, and not that of Facebook or any affiliation as well. But you know, it's like these things don't just go away, and when you have when you're put in these situations, you know, during those times, the parent didn't talk about those things, or in my case, didn't talk to me. And
Mhm.
so I carried that. I put it in the trunk.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
And once you put it in the trunk, it's in the trunk, but it's still there.
Right.
And you never really discussed it, went through it. Where did I go? Which direction? You don't know nothing. You just know, wow, what did I just do? You know?
Right.
So that's the thing I get at. And I get at also things that have gone on throughout generation and generation, generation, generation. And so I was thinking, I said, you know what? There were things, you know, that were not brought to the table, like, you know, uh, grandpa, girlfriend,
Right.
you know, things like that. These things weren't discussed. They
Hmm.
were known, but they weren't discussed. Grammy knew what Grandpa was doing. My pa knew what Grandpa was doing, and I'm not saying my grandparents, you know, per se, but just
Right.
to say that these are the type of things that went on and
Right.
still go on today. And so there's people that become affected by this that you don't have any idea, you know, you have no idea. Um, it's a lot right now. Like I, I speaking for a friend, uh, I, you know, it's people that don't know their parents, like their father, people who mother left them, you know, in the house,
Right.
and the dad had to come and fill in the blank or whatever. But these things are psychological things that take place, and
Right.
and so where I guess we all know about therapy and stuff like that, but I guess we're just talking right now in regards to when these things have gone on, what we've been exposed to,
Right.
what how has it affected our lives as we are through you, you know, teen, young adults, and
Mhm.
adults, you know. And so I'm just trying to see if I could get you to give me some feed into, you know, just dysfunctionality, generational dysfunctionality,
Right.
um, things, things of that nature.
Right. Right. Yeah. And you're right. It does carry over. It does carry over. To generation. But the most important thing is communication. Like we spoke about 2 weeks ago. You can't be afraid to have those conversations with your kids. When they become a certain age. you have to give them understanding on why you discipline them. You have to give them understanding, on why you're taking certain measures, to actually, so to speak, like punish them because they did something wrong. If you give them understanding, they'll have a better, way of looking at things. So if you're just the kind of parent that just comes in the house and you're just okay, hand to the backside and you go in the room and look at the football game, that's the wrong technique. As far as like disciplining your kids, you have to tell them why, even before they do it. Or even when you're explaining to them, hey, listen, I heard that you was around the corner doing something you didn't have any business doing. you know why don't you, what helps is that if you explain to a kid, the right way and the wrong way. I know I run my kids' ears off, especially my daughters. Growing up, I used to talk to them so much about right and wrong. They got tired of me. They used to cover their ears up and go the other way. Even when they wasn't doing nothing. But at the same time, also it embeds and implants a seed in them as they get older. Maybe they don't understand today, Chris, but they'll understand tomorrow because they have no experience in what you're talking about. So once they become adults and they have experience in what you're talking about or what you said 10 years ago, oh, Chris told me about this 5 years ago. Oh, Kurt told me that this was going to happen about 10 years ago. So you have to give your kids understanding, and explain to them what morals and integrity is all about. That's something that's missing, in society. We've compromised our integrity, and we used to have really great family morals, as well too. And so to speak, also, if it's something that needs to be said, that's going to be a detriment or has like a detrimental effect. Let's just say, for instance, um, here it is, 40 years later, Chris, and we're sitting at the family barbecue at a family reunion. Hey, listen, I don't need to know about, you killed my frog, Benny. I don't need to know about that. You killed my frog, Benny, and that now, I'm afraid of frogs. That that hasn't had like a dramatic effect on me. Oh, you killed him. Okay, all right, now you're telling me. But if it's something that has a very traumatic effect on you, I think that's something that needs to be explained, when at the very moment, instead of waiting 25 years later or 30 years later, because that can change and it has a possibility and a propensity of changing the entire trajectory of the course of your life. If it's something that's really detrimental, something that can just change the course of your entire life, that's a sticky one right there. Do you let someone know that, 30 years later, they have no problems in their life, they're doing very well? It can be about the very person that they're with at the moment. It can be about the person that they seeing every day at a certain function. But if, like the old saying, you know, um, if it's not broke, don't fix it. What do you do in a situation like that? That's why it's very important not to prolong when these things happen. Well, we're not going to say nothing about it. We're not going to say nothing about it. We're going, we're going to keep this up under the rug. But sometimes you need to come out and sometimes you need to have those conversations because, like I said, if you wait too late, here it is, 50, 60, people 50, 60 years old, and you wait to come out and I mean, with a bomb, Chrissy and Kurt, and that could just, had a propensity of, changing, someone's physicality, and how they think. It can throw them to some kind of mental lapse, and that's sticky. That's you got to be very careful with that. Just be careful. And sometimes people ask for it. I want to know. I need to know. I got to know. I got to know. If that's the case, just be ready for what you're about to hear. Be adult enough to be ready for what you're about to hear. Some things, I'm gonna tell you like this. Some things I don't want to know. I'm gonna be honest with you. Some things, if it's not affecting my life, if it's not changing, my goals, and if it's not changing, my spiritual, beliefs, I don't need to know certain things that happened 50 years ago if it doesn't involve me now. Now, I may end up, receiving therapy about something I really didn't even want to know. So if you're strong enough to handle, what you're asking for, that's a different story.
Yeah, I agree with that. I agree with that. And then, so then also when you're doing your parent, you know, and you're trying to show your children the right way, you know, um, and then they become rebellious, and they want to say things like, "I can't wait till I get out of this house," right? That's the thing that they say. I can't wait till I get out of this house, but they don't realize that right where they are is just like a comfortable nest for a little
Right.
baby bird. And, you know, then again, the dysfunctionality doesn't always have to be passed down through generations,
Right.
but can be something that onset at a new generation.
Right.
You see what I'm saying?
Right.
Because, for instance, school is not what school was when we were growing.
Oh, for
It's
sure.
not what school was when our parents were growing.
Right.
And there's so much, right, especially this bullying, because they doing bullying a whole different way. They doing cyberbullying, like, and people are so sensitive these days to things. You have to pronounce things correctly.
Right.
You got to make sure that when you're speaking, that you aren't offending a certain someone or a
Right.
certain group. And back in our days, like Grandpa used to say, that didn't matter. You was what you were,
Right.
and that was it. And we accepted it, and we didn't take offense to it. But as time goes on, these are the type of things that are going to continue to happen.
Right.
That the people in the world are going to become more sensitive
Right.
to the point that you're not even going to be able to speak without teardrops falling out there.
Right. You're absolutely, look, I'm sorry for cutting you off, but you're absolutely correct. Look, that comes from Kurt. You have a percentage now of kids, that say you got a percentage now of 67% of kids that stay in the house and have no communication, have no formal communication, with their parents or the outside world, so to speak, other than just going to school and going back and forth to the store. You got to look at the distractions that's taken the place of the common communication that we once had before, where there was no internet, where there was a phone in your house where you literally had to use your fingers or you had to dial the phone. And I know we couldn't use the phone after a certain time. So, look at the distractions now where kids, like we talked about 2 weeks ago, kids have more access to things that we didn't have access to, Chris, when we was growing up. You understand what I'm trying to say? So if they're making, more things more attractive, as far as video games, let's start there. Video games, certain things like, computers, where is that, the way the color scheme is and the way the schematics are, and just the way that you have a video game today. Man, your kid is going to pour more time into a video game, than taking up the time with their parents. They don't want to hear nothing we got to say. Your parents are corny now at this point. I'm into this video game. So it becomes a place now, where the kids, they're actually spending more time indoors now than outdoors. Going into the room, closing the door. It's just them in the video game. And so a lot of times you may just have to go back to that old school way of thinking, depending on the demographic and the dynamic of your household and the communication that you have with the children. They got to understand how communication, physical communication is very important. Is very important. You know, that may be the telltale of, them making a good decision versus a bad decision as well too. I'm not gonna let the internet raise my kids. If they get a certain age, they're on their own. I can't tell them what to do, and I can't, be there every waking moment, Chris. I can't, go in their college dorm rooms or go in their apartment and open up the window. You better stop doing that. You better put that down. And somebody's 25 and 26 years old. I'm not going to do that. But you do have that responsibility, as a parent, to guide them while they're young and teach them the right things. And I'm gonna say this again also. Some things I just don't want to know. I didn't want to know that Santa Claus wasn't real when I was young. My mother took me downtown Brooklyn. Hell, I was in the 4th grade, man, and my mother took me downtown Brooklyn, man. I'm like, why are you buying all these toys? What the hell? I said, why are you buying all these toys? And she looked at me and she said, I'm buying these toys for you. And I was like, huh? And something like that, I don't know whether to cry or I didn't know whether to jump for joy, but it stuck with me for a long time. And then when I went to school, Kurt, the next day, here it is, my big goofy behind. I'm in the 4th grade and I'm sharing this with some kids. Hey man, Santa Claus, man. Man, let me tell you something, Chris. Man, them kids laughed at me. I think them kids laughed at me for the rest of the school term. Matter of fact, I still get clowned about that by one guy that I used to contact with all the time. We was in the still same class. I remember that conversation we had. We was in the 4th grade, Spunk, and you still believed in Santa Claus, man. Hey, look, that stays right here, man. Hey, you talking about secrets? That's a secret that's gonna stay right here on this podcast. This ain't going nowhere else. All right.
Well, like that's what I'm saying. So it's out there now. Like the people going to see this, so everybody going to know Frank believes in Santa Claus until he was in the 4th grade.
4th grade.
That's okay. Okay. What happens is this, man, and I got so here's the thing: we got people that are having a difficult time getting in, and the thing about it is that this will air for 30 days. So if they can't see it at the moment, they will be able to see it, because I'm getting people coming in, um, and I got to try to stay focused on the topic, or else it's gonna be all mixed up. So let's go to this, right? So I have some questions, and I'll be having good questions too, right? So I'm kind of hoping you're ready. Okay, let's see.
Ain't no true and false questions, are they?
No. I'm not no true or false, but this one is, how can a person? Oh no, you know what? I forgot. I got some stuff right here for you. This way I ain't gotta keep reading it over.
One person has a scholar political family, so you can move forward and find. I would say approach. I honestly would say approach, Kurt. It depends on what it is, and if it's painful, like you're saying it is. Wow, it's all about approach. Maybe you need to confront the person. As an adult, and you just need to hash it out. Again, communication is very important. Maybe back then at the moment, people may have been in a different space, in their life. Moving forward as adults, they may be in a different space, where now you can sit down and you can talk as adults and you can try to hash it out, because perception is something, that people really take, in a different mannerism. I can perceive Chrissy to be away, but I really don't know until I sit down and I talk to her. Hey, listen, she looked at me funny when I seen her, um, at a wedding, but I really don't know, her, and I really don't know how she's feeling until I go up to her and I have a conversation with her. Hey, you hurt my feelings. You looked at me the wrong way. You didn't say hi to me. I really don't know until I go to her, until I ask her, hey, let me talk to you for a minute. Hey, listen, you know, um, maybe it's just me, but it seemed like every time when I'm around you, and this goes, for anyone, there's like a certain kind of negative energy, that I get, is it something that I did? Do I remind you of someone? Is it something that I may have done so I can apologize for it? An apology is very important. We may offend people and not even know it. It's just that, the right time and in the right place, people, need to talk about certain things. I know I have gotten that, I know I've gotten that, from people in my high school. They said that I used to go around and I used to say certain things to people. And, I never knew that I offended anyone until like years later. We're adults, and it did have a traumatic effect on certain people's lives, as far as verbally bullying people. Me, I'd like to crack a lot of jokes, especially when I was in high school, and didn't know that the verbal bullying went so as far as this one young lady told me she used to go home every day and cry. She said I really made her feel really bad, and I had to go and I had to apologize to her like years later, and